Hey guys, thanks for checking out this clip of Anatomy of the Church and State. Be sure to catch the full episode on Rumble or ChristiansForLiberty.com. Links are in the show description.
Hey, real quick,
So
Jeremiah, before we
yeah,
go on, before we get to the next thing, I do want to
yeah,
point
yeah,
out, I just thought about this and should mention to you earlier, but I also want to point out to those who are listening why it matters so much. Because
yeah,
the big question we get all the time is like, okay, uh, so who cares? Like, if God created over 6 days or millions of years, why does it matter? And that's a good question. That's a great question to ask. So, why does it matter? And I'm going to give you just a couple of quick reasons. Number one, it matters. Can we trust what the text clearly says in context? Right? So if Genesis 1 is clearly saying he made in 6 regular 24-hour days, he's spoken into existence by power of his word. There's a global flood that comes roughly 1,400 years later, lays on most of the rock layers and fossils we see today. If it says all these things, but then secularist or secular science says, no, it must be understood differently about our origin. It's been millions of years. Rock layers lay down slowly. Then there's a contract. There's a conflict there. They both can't be right.
right,
Those are two competing narratives. And so if the Bible can't be trusted about history, why trust it about morality or salvation? Right? It's a matter of authority. That's the first issue. The second issue is this. I'll be as quick as I can, and that is if you try to squeeze millions of years into the Bible, and just for full disclosure, I tried it for a long time myself. All right, as many Christians try to do at some point. But no matter how you try, inevitably you'll put death before sin.
mm,
And death before sin is theologically impossible for a bunch of reasons. You see, here's the big problem. If you reject the Bible's clear teaching that God made a perfect creation, but then man sinned, bringing death and suffering into this world, and then again, 1,400 years later, roughly, was a global flood that laid down most of the rock layers and fossils we see today. If you reject that and you instead embrace the secular idea, well, the secularists say this, that the rock layers and fossils, where they would suggest these supposed evidence for millions of years, that they were laid down slowly over millions of years. Watch this, long before man ever existed, and thus before sin. And in those rock layers laid down before man, before sin, you find lots of evidence of death, disease, bloodshed. But before man sinned, the Bible says God looked down on day six before man sinned and called everything very good. Guys, God would not call millions of years of death, suffering, bloodshed, cancer very good. If he did, he's not a very good God. And by the way, if that were true, that would make God the author of death. We're actually blaming God for death instead of our sin.
mm,
And there are thorns in the fossil record that are supposedly millions of years old, but the Bible's clear thorns came after the curse. They're a result of the curse. They're a symbol of the curse. And that's why Christ on the cross wore the crown of thorns. He bore the curse on our behalf. And then, most important of all, if you try to squeeze millions of years into the Bible, it really doesn't matter how you try. Day age theory, gap theory, progressive creation, theistic evolution, framework hypothesis, or cosmic temple, or whatever, they all inevitably put death before sin. And
mm,
watch this just logically and theologically. If there was death before sin, that would mean death is not the payment for sin, just always been around. And if death is not the consequence or payment for sin, then Jesus' death does not pay our sin debt. And we just undermine the foundation for Christ's atoning work on the cross, whether they meant to or not. And so I tell
yeah.
people all the time, that's why we care. I mean, our passion is not focused on winning a debate about the age of the earth or rock layers, but rather defending biblical authority and the gospel that's entrenched in that authority.
For sure, for sure. No, I'm glad you brought that up. It's an important question to ask, and you got to question yourself if you think, well, hey, is God a liar? If you think he's a liar, then you need to reevaluate your relationship with him, right?
Right.
It's like,
That's right.
uh,